Hello, ladies and gentlemen. RDO here, professional Hearthstone player for Team G2 Esports. With me, I have Seyil from the Hearthstone development team. Tell us more about yourself.
Hey, morning, guys. Hi, my name is Seyil Yoon. I'm the lead server engineer on the Hearthstone team. And my team is basically responsible for making sure that the servers are up and that everyone can play at any time of day. So we make sure that, anytime you want to log into the Hearthstone client on your phone and play, the game is there available for you to play.
So basically, Hearthstone has multiple development teams, people that do different things to make the game come together, right?
Yeah, so on the team, most of the people can kind of be divided up into 4 disciplines. And so the 4 disciplines are production, art, design, and engineering. And so I'm part of the engineering part of the team. And the engineering team overall is responsible for implementing a lot of the ideas that the designers have, obviously. And then production is responsible for all the scheduling and making sure that the releases are in good shape and launch on time. And then obviously art is pretty self-explanatory. So those are kind of the 4 main disciplines on the team.
So what is the most important thing that the server engineers have to do on a daily basis?
So from the perspective of kind of day-to-day, obviously we need to make sure that our service is up and running all the time. And if there are any problems, we'll respond to them and try to figure out what the problem is as quickly as possible. And then, of course, we have the cadence of major releases that we have. So we basically release like 9 big patches every year. So we have our 3 main content patches, so our 3 expansions, and then we have 3 point releases that come out a little bit after that, and usually there's a little bit of content associated with those as well. And then we have the 3 major patches that launch before the next expansion, which is when we release a little bit more content and there's pre-sales and so on. So we kind of have a daily and a weekly and a monthly type of cadence in terms of the things that we need to be responsible for.
That sounds like a lot of pressure on the team. Like, what does it happen when the servers go down? What are the priorities?
So generally speaking, the most important thing for us as a game is to make sure that people can play. And so sometimes we will prioritize that above all other things. So to give you an example, for the Ungoro and Knights of the Frozen Throne launch, I don't know if people recall, but immediately after the launch of each of these expansions, there was a short amount of time during which card acknowledgements were turned off. And what I mean by that is, when you open a pack, you get some new cards, and then when you go to Collection Manager and you see those cards in your Collection Manager, there's a little pop-up that says New. Basically says, these are new cards in your collection if you've never seen them before. And we want to highlight those because we want people to know, oh, what new cards have been added as a result of opening these packs. But if some people will recall, for a few days after the launch of each of these expansions, we made it so that even if you moused over the card and the little new window went away, the next time you log back in, it would show up as new again.
Yeah, I encountered this at some point.
Yeah, so the reason we did that was because checking off that new flag for cards in your collection, it requires a little bit of work on the server side. And at the time, as it always happens with a new expansion launch, we had a lot of people playing, a lot of people opening packs. And so we wanted to make sure that people were able to continue to open packs and play games, and we were willing to sacrifice some other parts of the service, like card acknowledgements.
So you value like people playing the game all the time,
yeah,
and then while they're playing the game, you're trying to slowly but surely fix the problems.
Yes, exactly, right. And I mean, so there's lots of different strategies that we can use for this. In the Hearthstone service, we kind of have a prioritization of what we consider high priority tasks, and we have things that we consider low priority tasks. So high priority tasks are always going to be things like the ability to play a game. So one of the things that came up during Kobolds and Catacombs launch, for example, is because of the dungeon runs, every time you beat a boss in a dungeon run, we save that information so that the next time you play another dungeon run game, it remembers and then takes you to the next boss.
And that's high priority, right?
Yeah, that's super high priority, right? We want people to be able to always play the game. But as a result of that, other lower priority tasks tended to fall behind a little bit. So one of the unfortunate things with Kobolds and Catacombs launch was that there was a problem with daily quests. So a lot of players experienced this problem where they would not get daily quests actually for a very long amount of time. And the reason for that was because we consider the granting of daily quests to be a lower priority than the work that's needed to be done in order for you to be able to play the games. But because so many people were playing dungeon runs, these tasks for granting daily quests were falling behind more and more as time went on, and it turned into a really pretty poor experience, unfortunately. And so, a few days after launch, we started kind of tweaking some things on the servers to make sure that daily quests were being granted in a more timely fashion. It was still a little bit delayed, but we got the granting of daily quests from like 30 minutes down to like 5 seconds or so, which it's not perfect, but it's kind of good enough for us. And like I said, it was still more important to us that everyone be able to play the game. And as long as people could play the game, that was our ultimate goal.
Yeah. Talking about the priorities, there was some talk in the community like some time ago that if Kriparian would press his disenchant button, the servers would go crazy. Can you tell us like what happens when somebody wants to disenchant their cards server-wise?
Yeah, so mass disenchant is another one of these tasks that we consider lower priority than gameplay. But when I say low priority, I don't mean that we'll disenchant your cards and then the dust will disappear into the air and you won't get them. That's not what I mean at all. What it means is that the work that actually occurs on the servers to remove the cards from your collection and add the dust, that ends up getting done later than other higher priority tasks. So at the time when Crip was trying to reach his subscriber goal, I forget exactly what the number was, and he was saying that once he hit this goal, he was going to press the button. We were keeping an eye on things. We also knew that, so first of all, I recall Broad made a post on Reddit about, if we had done this a couple years ago or something, there would have been major problems. I don't know that there would have been major problems, but one of the unfortunate things was, so first of all, when Crip pressed the button, the experience was a little confusing because he pressed the button and then the client just kind of sat there doing nothing. And it sat there and it sat there, and then it actually disconnected Crip. But then he logged back in and he had his dust.
So why is that?
Yeah, so basically what happened there was that at the time when the client pressed the button, it sent a message to the server saying, I want to do a mass disenchant, please do the work for me. And so the server was there kind of chugging away, doing the work required to do the mass disenchant, but because that operation took so long, it was not able to send a message back to the client saying, hey, I'm done. The client just was like, hey, you know what? The server doesn't seem to be talking to me. Maybe there's a problem. And in some cases like this, the client will just disconnect. But the server was still doing the work. And so by the time Crip logged back in to his client, the work had been completed, and all the updated information was sent back to his client, which is why he actually saw the correct number of dust on his collection. So that's basically what happened in that case.
So it still worked out pretty smoothly.
We can always do better. Ultimately, obviously, in a case like mass disenchant, the most important thing is we don't do the wrong thing, right? We don't want to take away the cards and give you the wrong amount of dust, or we don't want to give you, too much dust, or we don't want to, there's lots of things that can go wrong in that sort of instance. And so ultimately, the goal here is we have to do the right thing. Unfortunately, the client experience of that is not as nice as we would like. And so we've actually made some improvements to that as well, so that there's a little bit more feedback now. When you press the mass disenchant button, but it's a big mass disenchant, there'll kind of be animations going around, and you'll have an indication that something's happening, but it can still take a little bit of time.
Tell me more about the releases, because that's what I find an interesting subject as a player. I know back in the day, when I was playing, the release was kind of laggy at the beginning, but in Kobolds, it was just super smooth. And it was also simultaneous for Europe and America. Tell us something about that. Like, what happened? What changed server-wise?
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't know if a lot of people remember this, but there was a time a couple of years ago, I think it was during the Grand Tournament, or somewhere around that time frame, where we used to launch Europe much earlier than we did later on. And so we would like launch US, and then shortly after we would launch Europe, and then we would launch China and Korea. So there's a lot of factors that go into deciding when we want to launch a particular region. And one of the things we do on purpose, which I think some people find frustrating, but this is kind of a good tenet of service architecture, is we want to launch when we are not at peak, right? And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, whenever we launch a new expansion, lots of new people come to the game and they log in and they try to play, and so our concurrency levels tend to be much higher during expansion launch. So if something goes wrong, it's going to impact more people, right? And so we don't want that. I mean, that's a bad experience. And the second part of it is, we also want to make sure that we launch in a way that is sustainable for our team. So to give you an example of something that's not sustainable, during the launch of Knights of the Frozen Throne, again, if people will recall, we had login queues for a couple of days, I think, during the Knights of the Frozen Throne launch. Again, because a lot of people were logging in, a lot of people were playing, and it was a little bit laggy at that time. And so we used this thing called login queues to control the rate at which people logged into the game. Because the more people that are playing the game, kind of the more laggy it is. But as a result, we had people from my team basically online for 48 hours straight after Knights of the Frozen Throne launch, kind of hand tweaking stuff and making sure the service remains stable. So obviously, we don't want to do that. That's just not sustainable, right? People burn out, and it's just not good work-life balance.
Yeah.
So we spent a lot of time trying to improve the way our service would respond to big spikes in concurrency. And so we made a lot of improvements to EU, and also a very legitimate complaint that people had in EU was that EU would launch so much later than all the other regions, right? And as a result, a lot of players from EU would log into a US region just to kind of see what's going on and look at the new cards and stuff like that. But that's not an ideal experience either. Like, you want to play on your own account, right?
Yeah,
you don't want to just create this new account on EU just for the purposes of looking at stuff. And so for us, we really prioritized trying to get EU out in a more reasonable time frame. Now, we actually did end up launching EU pretty close to peak. And that was kind of a decision that we were kind of humming and hawing pretty late into the development cycle of Kobolds and Catacombs. But we had made a number of improvements to our service. And at that point, we kind of felt like, okay, this is worth the risk, and we think people will be happy with it, And
yeah. As a player, it felt like super smooth. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to ask, how was it from your perspective? Were you guys a bit afraid that it might go wrong?
We were very afraid. I mean, so generally speaking, we're afraid every expansion because, I mean, obviously, we have a great QA staff, and we have a great automation team that spend a lot of time doing the best they can to make sure that the game is going to be stable when it launches. But you just can't replicate what it is like when you launch in production and all these people log into your game at the same time.
Yeah.
It is impossible for us to replicate that sort of environment. And so every time we launch something, we're a little worried, but we have a lot of contingency plans. We have a lot of people on our team who are very invested in making sure that things go smoothly, and we spend a lot of hours just making sure things are okay. And so I feel like EU launch did go pretty well, and I think a lot of people were pretty happy with it, so I guess that was a success.
Yeah, I assume that you guys also have somebody always there in case the server goes down, because like the server can go down at like 4 a.m. and it will be up in like 10 minutes. So I cannot get my head around like how you guys are so good at problem solving and always have somebody on the site. It's incredible.
Well, I mean, so we have a lot of awesome people on the team. And while some of the technology that allows the service to come back up quickly is automated, a lot of it is still manual. And what I mean by that is, oftentimes the best time to collect information about what's going wrong is at the time when something bad happens, right? And the best way to collect that information is for someone to be available and make decisions based on what they see as far as what information to pull out. And so we're on call. I've gotten some late night phone calls at times. Not nearly as much as we used to a few years ago, but it still happens from time to time. Yeah.
Well, I think we covered quite some things, and I want to thank you and your team for always observing over the servers and making sure that we can play the game at any hour during the day or the night. And thank you for joining me in the talk.
Oh,
it was
thank
really
you very
nice.
much. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you.